You are listening to HOA Justice Stories. I brought facts, not feelings. Sandra slapped a bank statement on the table and screamed that the totals were correct, because she said so. "I will make sure everyone hears about this," she yelled, her voice cracking as spit flew from her mouth. The porch lights around us were starting to flicker on in the breezy dusk, and I could see neighbors slowing their cars at the entrance sign to watch. This was Stonegate Reserve Records Compliance Association in Spokane, Washington, and Sandra Harris was the HOA vice president who had just accused me of missing 3 months of dues even though I had receipts showing every payment cleared. I work as a network engineer, so I understand access logs and audit trails, and something about her fury told me this was not about money at all. It was about control, and I was about to lose my car if I did not fight back tonight. Sandra jabbed her finger at the paper. "Your bank is lying, or you are lying, or someone is lying. But it is not me. The policy says late fees stack, and you owe $4,000, effective immediately." She pulled a metal clipboard from under her arm and slammed it onto the table hard enough to rattle the screws. "I do not negotiate with violations," she added, her voice dropping into that fake authority tone she used at every meeting. I kept my phone in my pocket with the recording light on, screen turned away, because I had learned 3 years ago that Sandra did not play fair. Back then, another resident named Miguel had been hit with the same accusation, the same mystery late fees, the same tow threat. He paid under protest and moved out 6 months later, and the case went cold because no one wanted to fight the HOA machine. But now Sandra was using the exact same playbook on me, and I had a strict work shift starting in 4 hours that required my car. If she towed it, I would get fired, and I was rebuilding my finances after a bad year. I could not absorb bogus fees or lose my income. "I need to see the payment log," I said, keeping my voice level. "Show me the dates you say I missed, and show me the rule page that says you can backdate enforcement." Sandra's face went red and she snatched the clipboard back. "The rule page is in the resident handbook, and if you lost yours, that is your problem. I can print you a copy for $20, but it will take 30 business days to process because records requests require board approval." She turned to leave, and I stepped in front of her. "I did not lose anything, Sandra. I have the handbook right here, and the page you keep citing is missing." I pulled the binder from my hoodie pocket and flipped it open to the section on dues. Page 47 was blank. The header was there, but the body text was gone, replaced by a white space that looked like someone had printed a custom version and swapped it into the official packet. Sandra grabbed for the binder, but I pulled it back. "Where did you get that?" she snapped. "I got it from the management company 3 months ago when I moved in, same as everyone else, so either you handed out incomplete packets or someone edited mine. Either way, you cannot enforce a rule I was never given." Sandra's jaw clenched and she pulled out her phone. "I am calling the tow company right now and your car will be gone in 20 minutes. You can argue with them at the impound lot." She dialed, and I heard the line ring twice before a man answered. "This is Sandra Harris, Vice President of Stonegate Reserve. I need an immediate tow on a vehicle in violation of dues policy space 14 gray sedan." The man on the other end said something I could not hear, and Sandra nodded. "Yes, I have the authorization." "No, he is standing right here refusing to comply." She hung up and smiled. "The truck is on the way. You have 15 minutes to move your car off the property, or it gets hooked." I walked to my car and unlocked it, but I did not drive away. Instead, I sat in the driver's seat, with the door open, and pulled up my bank app. I had screenshots of every payment confirmation going back 6 months, and I had the routing details showing the HOA account number as the recipient. I also had something Sandra did not know about yet. 3 years ago, when Miguel got hit, he had saved a copy of the enforcement notice before he paid. And he had emailed it to me last week, after I posted in the neighborhood group chat asking if anyone else had been targeted. The notice he got was identical to mine, word for word, down to the same mystery administrative surcharge line and the same 30-day records request delay. That was not a coincidence. That was a template, and Sandra had used it twice. The tow truck rolled up 10 minutes later, a flatbed with yellow strobes flashing. The driver got out, a middle-aged guy in a reflective vest with a clipboard of his own. Sandra was already walking toward him, waving her metal clipboard like it was a warrant. "He is in violation," she said, pointing at me. "Hook it now, and I will handle the paperwork." The driver looked at me, then at Sandra, then at the car. "I need to see the authorization form and the violation notice signed by the board president." Sandra froze for half a second, then recovered. "I am the vice president, and I have full enforcement authority under the bylaws." The driver shook his head. "That is not what the contract says. I need the president's signature or a board vote documented in the meeting minutes. Otherwise, I cannot tow without police confirmation of abandonment or safety hazard." Sandra's face went from red to purple. "This is a compliance issue, not a police issue. You work for us, so do your job." The driver took a step back. "Ma'am, I work for the tow company, and my job is to follow the contract. If you want to change the terms, call my dispatcher, but I am not hooking a vehicle without proper authorization." Sandra spun toward me. "This is your fault. You are escalating this into a legal nightmare, and when the board votes to lien your property, you will lose everything." I stayed calm. "Sandra, I have bank records showing I paid on time. You have a clipboard and a missing rule page. If you want to lien me, go ahead, but I will file a complaint with the management company and the state, and I will make sure every payment I made gets audited." The tow driver looked between us, then climbed back into his truck. "I am leaving. If you sort this out and get proper authorization, call dispatch and we will come back." He drove off, and Sandra stood there, shaking with rage. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen, then looked at me. "You think you won something tonight, but you just made this worse. Tomorrow morning, the board meets, and I am bringing a motion to accelerate your dues for the full year and add penalties for obstruction. You will owe $12,000 by Friday, and if you do not pay, we will file the lien and start foreclosure." She turned and walked toward the clubhouse, her key ring jingling with every step. I sat in my car and let out a long breath. The tow threat was gone for now, but Sandra had just moved the goalposts. She was not going to back down, and she had the board majority on her side. The president, a retired accountant named Bill, usually rubber-stamped whatever Sandra wanted, and the rest of the board were neighbors who did not want trouble. If Sandra brought the motion tomorrow, it would pass, and I would be buried in fees I could not fight without a lawyer I could not afford. I needed leverage, and I needed it fast. That is when I remembered the third clue Miguel had mentioned in his email. He said the HOA accounting software had a public-facing portal for residents to check balances, and when he logged in after paying, his account showed 0 for 2 weeks, before Sandra's office updated it to show late fees. He had taken a screenshot, and the metadata showed it was created the same day Sandra filed the lien. That meant someone had backdated the entry, and if they did it to Miguel, they might have done it to me. I drove home and logged into the HOA portal on my laptop. My account page loaded, and I checked the payment history. 3 entries were marked late, all from the past 90 days, and all showing a timestamp of 11:47 p.m. on the date Sandra claimed I missed the deadline. But the bank confirmations I had showed the payments clearing at 9:14 a.m., 10:03 a.m., and 8:52 a.m. on those same dates. The portal was lying, or someone was editing it after the fact. I clicked on the audit log link at the bottom of the page, and a pop-up appeared asking for admin credentials. I closed it and opened a new tab. If Sandra was editing payment records, she was doing it through the management company's back end, and that meant there was a trail. I needed access to the server logs, but I did not have admin rights. What I did have was Miguel's screenshot, my own bank records, and a hunch that Sandra had been running this scam for years. The next morning, I skipped work and drove to the management company's regional office in downtown Spokane. The building was a low brick box with tinted windows and a lobby that smelled like burnt coffee. I walked up to the front desk and asked to speak to the regional supervisor. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses and a name tag that said Brenna, looked up from her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" I shook my head. "This is urgent. I am a resident at Stonegate Reserve, and I need to report a compliance issue with the vice president." Brenna frowned. "Compliance issues go through your board first, then escalate to us if unresolved." I leaned on the counter. "The vice president is the one committing the violation. She is backdating payment records and threatening residents with fraudulent fees. I have proof, and I need someone above her to see it before she files a lien tomorrow." Brenna hesitated, then picked up her phone. "Let me see if he is available." 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a cramped office across from a man named Derek, the regional supervisor. He was in his 50s, bald, and wearing a polo shirt with the management company logo. I showed him the bank confirmations, the portal screenshots, Miguel's email, and the blank handbook page. Derek studied each piece, his expression getting darker as he flipped through the stack. "This is serious," he said. "If what you are showing me is accurate, Sandra Harris has been altering financial records and enforcing policies that do not exist. That is fraud, and it is grounds for immediate removal. But I need to verify this with the server logs before I can act." "How long will that take?" I asked. Derek looked at his computer. "I can pull the logs today, but I need to notify the board president first. It is protocol." I shook my head. "If you notify Bill, he will warn Sandra, and she will delete everything. You need to lock her out of the system first, then pull the logs." Derek frowned. "I cannot lock out a board member without cause. What you are asking me to do could open the company to liability." I leaned forward. "And if you do not act, Sandra files a lien tomorrow, and I lose my home. You have cause right now, sitting in front of you." Derek stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Give me 2 hours." I spent those 2 hours sitting in my car outside the management office, watching the clock and wondering if Derek was actually pulling the logs, or if he was calling Sandra right now to cover his own liability. At 11:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was an email from Derek, with the subject line, "Urgent Stonegate Logs, Attache." I opened it, and my hands started shaking. The attachment was a PDF of the server audit log, and it showed 23 instances of Sandra's admin account accessing the payment portal outside of business hours over the past 18 months. Each entry was followed by a database update to the late fee column. The timestamps matched the dates residents had been hit with mystery charges, including Miguel and me. Derek's email said he had forwarded the report to the management company's legal team and locked Sandra's admin access, pending an internal investigation. He also said the board meeting scheduled for tomorrow was canceled, and the company was requiring a special session with an independent auditor present. I waited for the right audience, because the reveal needed witnesses. The special session was scheduled for Saturday morning at the clubhouse, and Derek told me the management company was sending a lawyer and an auditor to observe. Bill, the board president, sent an email to all residents saying the meeting was mandatory for board members and open to anyone who wanted to attend. I printed a copy of the server logs, the bank confirmations, and Miguel's notice, and I put them in a binder with tabs. On Saturday morning, I walked into the clubhouse at 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the meeting started. The room was packed. 30 residents sat in folding chairs, and Sandra was standing near the front with her metal clipboard, talking to Bill in a low, urgent voice. She saw me walk in, and her face went pale. Bill called the meeting to order, and Derek stood up to introduce the lawyer and the auditor. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in a gray suit, said the management company had received a report of financial irregularities and was conducting a mandatory review of all payment records and enforcement actions taken by the board over the past 3 years. Sandra interrupted. "This is a witch hunt. Someone filed a false complaint because they do not want to pay their dues, and now you are wasting everyone's time." The lawyer did not blink. "Miss Harris, the complaint included server logs showing unauthorized database access from your admin account. We are not here to debate whether the complaint is valid. We are here to determine whether the records support the enforcement actions you took. If you have documentation proving the late fees were accurate, now is the time to present it." Sandra slammed her clipboard on the table. "I have documentation. Every resident who was fined received a notice, and every notice was based on the payment log." The lawyer nodded. "Then let's review the log." She opened her laptop and projected the HOA payment portal onto the screen at the front of the room. The auditor stood up and walked to the laptop. "I pulled the raw database export this morning, and I cross-referenced it with the bank records provided by the residents who were fined. In 23 cases, the late fee entries were added to the database after the payment had already cleared the bank. The timestamps show the edits were made between 1100 p.m. and 100 a.m., and the admin account used for the edits was Sandra Harris." The room went silent. Sandra's face turned red and she pointed at the screen. "That is not possible. I do not have access to the database. I only have access to the portal, and the portal does not let you edit payment dates." The auditor clicked a button, and a new screen appeared showing the admin panel. "This is the back end you used, Miss Harris. The management company tracks every login, and your account accessed this panel 41 times in the past 18 months, including 3 times this week." I stood up. "I have something to add." I walked to the front and handed the lawyer my binder. "This is a bank confirmation showing my payments cleared on time. This is a screenshot of the portal showing those same payments marked late. And this is a notice sent to another resident 3 years ago using the exact same template Sandra used on me. The dates are different, but the wording is identical, including a line about administrative surcharges that do not appear in the bylaws." The lawyer flipped through the binder, and her expression hardened. "Miss Harris, did you create a template for enforcement notices?" Sandra did not answer. The lawyer looked at Derek. "Mr. Caldwell, does the management company approve enforcement templates?" Derek shook his head. "No. Every notice is supposed to be drafted individually and reviewed by the board president before it is sent. Sandra has been bypassing that process." Bill stood up, his face gray. "Sandra, is this true? Did you send notices without board approval?" Sandra's hands were shaking. "I was protecting the association. We have residents who do not pay on time, and if we do not enforce the rules, the whole system falls apart. I did what I had to do to keep this community running." Bill's voice was quiet but firm. "You lied to me. You told me every enforcement action was legitimate, and you had me sign off on liens without showing me the payment records. How many people did you do this to?" The auditor spoke up. "Based on the database, 23 residents were charged late fees that did not match the bank records. 16 of those residents paid under protest, and 7 moved out within 6 months. Sandra Harris collected approximately $68,000 in late fees and administrative surcharges over 3 years, and none of that money was documented in the annual budget reports. The room exploded. Residents started shouting questions, and someone yelled that Sandra should be arrested. The lawyer held up her hand. "Everyone, please. This is now a legal matter, and the management company will be filing a formal complaint with the State Attorney General. Ms. Harris, you are removed from the board effective immediately, and your access to all HOA systems is terminated. The association will be refunding the improperly collected fees to the affected residents, and the management company will be conducting a full audit of the financials. If criminal charges are filed, that will be handled by law enforcement." Sandra stood there, frozen, her phone buzzing in her pocket. Bill spoke up. "Sandra, you need to leave." Sandra looked at him, then at the crowd, then at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She picked up her clipboard and walked toward the door. But she stopped halfway and turned around. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." She said it like a mantra, like if she repeated it enough times it would become real. But the auditor had already pulled the meeting minutes from the server, and the screen at the front of the room now showed 3 years of board votes. Every enforcement action Sandra had taken was missing from the minutes. There was no record of board approval, no quorum, no vote. The entire enforcement wave was invalid. Sandra's phone died mid-rant and she froze in place, staring at the black screen like it had betrayed her. Someone in the back of the room laughed, and Sandra flinched. She turned and walked out, the door slamming behind her. Bill sat down heavily. "I need to resign. I did not catch this and I should have." The lawyer shook her head. "Mr. Fletcher, resignation is not required, but the board will need to hold new elections and implement oversight procedures. The management company will be assigning an interim compliance officer to review every enforcement action going forward, and we will be requiring dual signatures on all financial notices. This is a systemic failure, not just a single bad actor." Derek stood up. "For now, the meeting is adjourned. Residents who were affected by the fraudulent fees will receive a refund within 30 days, and the management company will be covering the cost of the audit. If anyone has additional documentation or complaints, my office is open." The room cleared slowly, and I stayed behind to talk to the lawyer. She handed me a business card. "You did the right thing. If you had not pushed for the audit, this would have continued for years." I nodded. "What happens to Sandra now?" The lawyer's expression was grim. "The management company is filing a complaint with the State Attorney General for fraud and embezzlement. If the AG decides to prosecute, Sandra could face criminal charges. At a minimum, she will be banned from serving on any HOA board in the state, and she will be required to repay the stolen funds. The tow company has already canceled their contract with the association after reviewing the incident reports, and they are refunding the fees charged to residents whose vehicles were threatened without proper authorization." I felt a weight lift off my chest. It is over. The lawyer smiled. "For you, yes. For Sandra, it is just starting. If you want to see more HOA stories where the rules get flipped, hit that subscribe button and drop a like." I drove home and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the community entrance sign where Sandra had confronted me a week ago. The breezy dusk felt different now, quieter, like the neighborhood itself was exhaling. My phone buzzed, and I saw an email from the management company with the subject line "Refund Processed." I opened it and the message said my account had been credited for the fraudulent late fees, and my dues record was updated to show 0 balance owed. There was a second attachment, a letter confirming that the tow company had refunded the charges and voided the tow attempt. I saved both emails and backed them up to 3 different drives, because I had learned the hard way that you never trust a system to remember the truth. Miguel called me that night. "I heard what happened," he said. "You actually did it. You took her down." I leaned back in my chair. "We took her down." You saved that notice, and that is what connected the dots. Without your email, I would not have known to look for the template." Miguel laughed. "I wish I had fought back when it happened to me, but I was scared. I did not think anyone would believe me. I told him the management company was refunding everyone, and he went quiet. I moved 2 states away because of her. I lost $15,000 between the fees and the moving costs, and I thought it was over. Now you are telling me I can get some of that back?" I nodded, even though he could not see me. "Call Derek on Monday. He has your file." The next week, the local news picked up the story. A reporter from the Spokane paper called and asked if I would go on record, and I said yes. The article ran with the headline, "HOA Vice President Accused of Fraud After Resident Uncovers Payment Scheme." It quoted Derek, the lawyer, and me, and it included a sidebar listing the 23 affected residents. Sandra's name was in bold at the top, and the article mentioned that the state attorney general had opened an investigation. The comments section filled up fast, and half the posts were from people saying they had similar experiences with other HOAs. One commenter said Sandra had tried to fine them for parking in their own driveway 5 years ago, and they had paid because they did not know how to fight it. Another said Sandra had called the police on their teenager for skateboarding in the street, and the cop had told Sandra to stop wasting their time. The pattern was clear. Sandra had been running this playbook for years, and the only reason she got caught was because she got greedy and picked the wrong target. 2 weeks later, Bill called an emergency board meeting to hold new elections. I did not run, but Miguel did, and he won the vice president seat by a landslide. The new board voted to disband the compliance committee and replace it with a resident-elected oversight panel, and they passed a rule requiring all enforcement notices to be reviewed by 2 board members and the management company before they could be sent. Derek told me the changes were some of the strongest accountability measures he had seen in 20 years, and he was recommending them to other associations. I told him he should have done that 3 years ago, and he did not argue. Sandra never showed up to another HOA event. A neighbor told me she moved out of Stonegate Reserve in March, 2 months after the meeting. The house went up for sale, and the listing mentioned recent updates to the HOA governance, which I thought was a polite way of saying the previous vice president was a criminal. The Attorney General filed charges in April, and Sandra pled no contest to fraud and embezzlement. She was sentenced to probation, community service, and full restitution to the affected residents. The judge also banned her from serving on any HOA board or property management role for 10 years, and the sentence was published in the court records. Miguel sent me a screenshot of the filing, and we both saved it. The cold case was closed, but the damage Sandra caused took longer to repair. 3 of the residents who had been targeted ended up moving anyway, even after the refunds, because they did not trust the HOA anymore. I understood that. Once someone weaponizes the rules against you, it is hard to believe the system will protect you the next time. But for the people who stayed, the new board made a difference. The enforcement process slowed down, but it became transparent. Notices included documentation, and residents could request a hearing before any fees were applied. It felt like a neighborhood again instead of a surveillance state. I kept working my shifts, and my car stayed in my driveway without any more tow threats. The management company sent a formal apology letter to everyone who had been affected, and they offered free legal consultations for anyone who wanted to review their account history. I took them up on it, and the lawyer confirmed that my record was clean and the fraudulent fees were expunged. She also told me the management company had fired 2 employees who had ignored complaints about Sandra, and they were overhauling their compliance training. It felt like too little, too late, but it was something. Miguel and I stayed in touch, and we started a group chat for the affected residents. We called it Receipts Mode, and we used it to share tips on dealing with HOA issues and to keep each other updated on the legal case. When Sandra's sentencing came through, we all posted screenshots and celebrated. It was petty, but it felt earned. She had tried to destroy us, and we had turned the tables. The group chat grew over time, and people from other neighborhoods started joining after the news article went viral. We became an informal support network, and Miguel joked that we should start a non-profit. I told him to go for it, and he actually did. He filed the paperwork in June, and by August he had a website and a hotline for people dealing with abusive HOAs. I helped him set up the server infrastructure, and we made it free to use. The final piece of the puzzle came in September, when the auditor released the full financial report. It turned out Sandra had been skimming money from the reserve fund as well, not just the late fees. She had created fake invoices for landscaping and maintenance work that never happened, and she had paid those invoices to a shell company she controlled. The total theft was over $200,000, and the report recommended the HOA file a civil lawsuit to recover the funds. The board voted yes, and the case went to court. Sandra settled before trial, agreeing to repay the full amount plus interest. The settlement was funded by liquidating her retirement account and selling her house, and the HOA used the recovered money to repave the roads and upgrade the community pool. It felt like justice. I ran into Bill at the mailbox cluster one day in October, and he apologized again. I should have caught what Sandra was doing, he said. I trusted her, and that was a mistake. I told him trust was not the problem. The problem was the system that let one person have that much power without oversight. Bill nodded. The new board is different. We have checks now, and we are rebuilding. I appreciate what you did, even if it made me look bad. I told him he did not look bad. He looked human, and that was better than looking complicit. Sandra's name became a cautionary tale in the HOA world. Derek told me other management companies were using the case as a training example, and some states were introducing legislation to require third-party audits for associations over a certain size. I testified at a hearing in Olympia, and the committee chair thanked me for bringing the issue to light. The bill passed in November, and it was named the Homeowner Protection Act. Miguel and I joked that we should get a plaque, but honestly, the real reward was knowing Sandra could never do this again. The tow yard gate argument scene became a legend in the neighborhood. People who were not even there claimed they saw it, and the story got wilder every time it was retold. In some versions, Sandra tried to climb onto the tow truck, and the driver called the cops. In others, I stood in front of the truck and refused to move until Sandra admitted she was lying. The truth was less dramatic, but it was enough. The driver did his job, Sandra lost her leverage, and I walked away with my car. Sometimes the smallest wins are the ones that matter most. The records room hallway scene happened 2 days before the special session. I was at the management office dropping off a document, and I saw Sandra near the file carts in the hallway outside Derek's office. She was pulling a folder from one of the carts, and when she saw me, she froze. I walked closer, and she slammed the folder shut and shoved it under her arm. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. I held up the envelope in my hand. "Same thing you are. Dropping off paperwork." Sandra's face went red. "You are spying on me. You are trying to sabotage the board, and I am going to file a harassment complaint." I did not move. "Sandra, if you take that folder, it is theft. Derek will notice it is missing, and it will just add to the evidence." Sandra hesitated, then threw the folder back onto the cart and walked away. I picked up the folder after she left, and it was labeled Stonegate Payment Disputes 2022. Inside were copies of complaints from 5 residents, all reporting the same issue: late fees that did not match their bank records. Sandra had been hiding them. I handed the folder to Derek, and he added it to the audit file. That was the moment I knew Sandra was going down, because she had just proved she knew the complaints existed and she had been covering them up. The lawyer used that folder in the special session, and it was one of the pieces that forced Sandra to resign. She tried to claim she was organizing the records for efficiency, but the auditor pointed out that the folder was dated 3 years ago and had never been entered into the system. Sandra had no answer. The neighborhood changed after Sandra left. People started coming to board meetings again, and the new transparency rules made it easier to hold the board accountable. Miguel ran a monthly open forum where residents could ask questions and raise concerns, and the attendance was higher than any meeting Sandra had ever held. The management company hired a new compliance officer who actually responded to emails, and Derek got promoted to director of operations. He told me the Stonegate case had reset the company's priorities and they were taking fraud prevention seriously now. I told him it should not have taken a felony to make that happen, but I appreciated the effort. The final showdown happened at the community entrance sign area on a Saturday morning in late September. Sandra showed up unannounced, her car packed with boxes, and she tried to corner Bill in the parking lot. I was walking my dog and I saw her pull up. Bill was loading groceries into his trunk, and Sandra got out of her car holding a stack of papers. "You owe me an explanation," she said, her voice shaking. "You let them destroy me. You were supposed to back me up, and instead you threw me under the bus." Bill closed his trunk and turned to face her. "Sandra, I backed you up for 3 years, and you lied to me the entire time. You committed fraud, and you dragged the board into it. I do not owe you anything." Sandra's face crumpled, and she threw the papers at him. They scattered across the pavement, and I saw they were copies of old board minutes with Sandra's notes in the margins. She had been planning to use them as proof that Bill knew about the enforcement actions, but the auditor had already reviewed the minutes and confirmed Bill had no knowledge of the backdated fees. I walked over and stood beside Bill. Sandra glared at me. "This is your fault. You started this witch hunt, and you ruined my life." I shook my head. "I did not ruin your life, Sandra. You did that when you decided to steal from your neighbors and lie about it. The only thing I did was keep records, and the only thing you did was get caught." Sandra opened her mouth, then closed it. She turned and got back in her car, and she drove away without picking up the papers. Bill and I stood there for a minute, watching her car disappear around the corner. He bent down and started picking up the papers, and I helped him. We did not talk, but we did not need to. It was over. The tow company refunded charges, voided the tow attempt, and canceled the HOA contract after seeing the evidence packet. They sent a formal letter to the board apologizing for the incident and confirming they had terminated their relationship with Sandra. The new board hired a different tow company with a transparent enforcement process, and they required written authorization from 2 board members before any vehicle could be hooked. It was not perfect, but it was progress. The HOA retracted the enforcement action in writing, and they sent a formal apology to every resident who had been targeted. The letter included a breakdown of the refunded fees and a promise to implement stronger oversight. Sandra was told to step down and she could not spin it. The management company made it clear in a public statement that she had been removed for cause, and the state attorney general's office confirmed the criminal investigation was ongoing. There was no ambiguity, no room for her to claim she was a victim. She was gone, and everyone knew why. A complaint to the management company that triggered discipline was the final nail. The regional office reviewed every case Sandra had handled, and they found irregularities in over 60% of the enforcement actions. The company imposed a $5,000 fine on the association for failing to catch the fraud earlier, and they required the board to complete compliance training. Derek told me the fine was symbolic, but the training was mandatory, and it covered financial oversight, conflict of interest, and resident rights. The new board took it seriously, and Miguel made it a priority to share what he learned with the neighborhood. I kept the metal clipboard as a souvenir. It was still sitting on my desk, a reminder that even the smallest prop can become a weapon in the wrong hands. Sandra had used it to intimidate people, but in the end, it was just a piece of aluminum and plastic. The real power was in the records, the receipts, and the willingness to fight back when the system failed. I waited for the right audience, because the reveal needed witnesses, and I showed a bank confirmation showing my payments cleared, and the HOA marked them late anyway. That moment, standing in front of 30 neighbors and 2 lawyers, was the turning point. Sandra could not talk over the evidence, and the board could not ignore it. The neighborhood group chat post painting me as a repeat offender from a past case never materialized, because Sandra ran out of time. She tried to draft it the night before the special session, but her admin access was already locked, and she could not post anything without going through the new board. Miguel saw the draft in the system logs after Derek pulled the audit, and he told me it was vicious. Sandra had planned to accuse me of harassment, trespassing, and filing false complaints, and she had a list of neighbors she was going to recruit as witnesses. None of them ever got the message, and the plan died before it launched. The retaliatory records denial unless I paid ridiculous copy fees and waited 30 days was Sandra's last desperate move, and it backfired. The lawyer told the board that charging residents for records access was illegal under state law, and the management company issued a formal policy change requiring all records to be provided free of charge within 5 business days. Sandra's tactic became the catalyst for a rule that protected everyone. The witness who changed their story after Sandra cornered them in private was a neighbor named Greg. He lived 2 streets over, and he had been one of the people Sandra fined 3 years ago. Greg told Miguel he saw Sandra editing the portal one night through the clubhouse window, but when Sandra found out he was talking, she showed up at his house and threatened to file a nuisance complaint if he testified. Greg backed down, and Sandra thought she was safe. But after the special session, Greg came forward again and gave a written statement to the lawyer. He said he was tired of being scared, and he wanted to do the right thing. His testimony was included in the Attorney General's case, and it helped establish a pattern of intimidation. Sandra never knew Greg flipped until the charges were filed. The board votes that happened without a quorum made the entire enforcement wave invalid. The auditor found that Sandra had been holding votes during phone calls with just Bill and one other board member, which did not meet the quorum requirement under the bylaws. That meant every fine, every lien threat, and every tow authorization Sandra had issued over the past 3 years was legally void. The management company had to unwind dozens of cases, and some residents who had already paid got refunds. It was a bureaucratic nightmare, but it was the right outcome. Sandra had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom, and the system finally caught up. I never got an apology from Sandra, and I did not expect one. She was not the type to admit fault, and even after the sentencing, she maintained she had been doing what was best for the community. But the evidence spoke louder than her justifications, and the consequences were real. She lost her position, her reputation, and a significant chunk of her savings. The neighborhood moved on, and Sandra became a cautionary tale. People still talked about her at meetings, but the tone shifted from anger to pity. She had been given power, and she had used it to hurt people. That was her legacy. Miguel told me he was proud of how the neighborhood had come together after the scandal. The new board was functional, the management company was responsive, and the residents felt like they had a voice again. He said it was not perfect, but it was better than it had been in years. I agreed. The fight had been exhausting, but it was worth it. I had my car, my home, and my peace of mind. Sandra was gone, and the rules were finally being used the way they were supposed to be, to protect people, not to punish them. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.